My name is David Perrett. I'm a sculptor. I work with whatever material suits the project at any given time. So sometimes that's stone, sometimes it's wood, sometimes it's composites. It's all concept driven. I like to try and use the interplay of the materials and the subject matter as part of what the structure of the finished sculpture is going to be, with an understanding that the process of making plays into it. So sometimes there are flaws in process that I will maintain throughout into the finished piece because they're more interesting, and I don't like to hide the manufacturing elements of art making. A lot of it is sort of landscape-based in a way. I find that places and the sensations they give me are often a major influence. There's always an element of sort of place and materiality. I really like what materials are. There's a tactility to them. There's a whole lot of baggage that comes with them too. When you see something made of gold, it has a certain feeling, a certain meaning that's already there. When you have something made of stone, it has a certain feeling and meaning. There's a certain gravity. And you can use that as an element, or you can subvert it. Like when you make stones that suddenly look like they're flying and weightless, you have a totally dissonant experience for the viewer. It's that combination of place and material and experience. I don't try and create narratives. I don't want to tell a direct story. And a big part of what I'm trying to do in my artwork is leave what I'm creating in the work. So by the time that I'm finished, I'm not as interested in telling the public what my inspirations or intentions were, because if it's there, it's there. And if it's not, it's not. I'm perfectly comfortable with the idea that there are things that come out of my artwork that aren't what I was originally thinking about, but are just as relevant as my original ideas. And artist intentionality, for me, to a large degree, stops the moment that the piece is released into the public. Processes that I work with and the methods I use are extraordinarily laborious. They tend to be pretty punishing. When you're lifting stones, when you're welding, when you're casting, especially when you're sand casting, you're smashing things all the time. There's an enormous amount of physical labor, and it can be exhausting. And when you get down to the finishing processes, especially in stone, I have pieces where I have literally spent 4 weeks rubbing a rock with another rock in order to try and complete the work. I work with almost everything. I've done everything from gold to aluminum, from limestone to granite. I have a couple of chunks of jade sitting in the shop waiting for the right idea. It really is idea driven. But I think a lot of it too is just finding the right pieces and the right processes to get the results that I want. A lot of the ideas that I get come in sort of images. They're rarely complete, but they're sort of flashes of inspiration that I then have to figure out, how do you do that? I also like the idea of making things that people wonder how it was done. There's a bit of a lack of sort of wonder and surprise, and so if I can introduce a little bit of that through some of the sculptures or placing things in surprising ways and places, then that always makes me happy. So because I bump between processes, it's almost impossible for me to have the same technical ability that someone who works in this stuff all the time have. It's just not doable. I'm also not as interested in hiring fabricators. The overwhelming majority of artists who work at a large scale nowadays are doing a modest amount of their own fabrication. It's much more design and then hire a fabricator. Even when I work with people who are art fabricators, I typically prefer to work side by side because that material experimentation is part of my process. I don't want to say, here's my design, go make it. I want to have that discovery, have that process. Okay, so this is a molding table that I built after Jeff started helping me because my original plan did not work. So the sand is a special kind of casting sand, and it is an oil base. So it's a mix of clay and sand and oil that can be reused, and it gets really great detail in the pieces that you're doing. However, it's also extremely expensive. 50 pounds of the stuff is just shy of $200. So you want to make sure that you're not losing any more than you have to, and you want to make sure that you can reclaim it. So hence the giant reservoir underneath where we can get the sand back. Basically, you put your pattern in onto the molding board, you screen sand over top of it to get a nice fine texture, pack that down, and then you fill up the rest of your flask and ram it with as hard and compact as you can so it'll hold itself in place. You do that on both sides, leaving a tube for the sprue and the reservoir to actually pour into it. And then you open the mold up, take out the original pattern, and you actually have to carve, basically it's called gating, but you carve tubes to allow the aluminum to reach all the different points that you need. So when we take this down, we will fire up the furnace, we'll melt the aluminum in the crucible, and then we pour our aluminum in there, and it will spread through gravity and pressure to fill up every pocket of the void. We hope. I'm very tactile. I'm the guy who's wandering through downtown, running his fingers along the stone surfaces of all the old buildings. There's an enormous amount of artwork where you're looking in at something. And like art galleries, you can't touch the work. There's a certain something about putting artwork out in the public sphere where it can be stumbled upon. It doesn't have the same frameworks and structures of this is how you experience this because this is art. It doesn't have that same expectation that it is viewed as immediately precious. So that gives it a lot of flexibility. And I like the idea that when a piece of artwork exists in real life, it creates an opportunity for an evolving relationship. Whether it's in a private collection or whether it's a piece of public art, it's something that someone is going to be living with every day in the round. You walk past it, you walk around it, you touch it, you interact with it, and you have potentially decades to develop what is a very sense-based, a very tactile relationship with the object. So all of those things I think are really a big part of how I experience the world and a big part of what I want to make in my process.